Hello there, and good morning. It is the first day of the long summer holidays in the UK, at least for some people's schools, my daughter's school, and I thought I would mark the occasion by explaining why it is that I had a phone call from my daughter's school during the mock exams asking me if she was okay because she looked, as they said, dishevelled. And I laughed when they phoned me and I said, "Have you met her?" And it turned out that the invigilator in one of her mock exams didn't know her very well and saw that she had on a crumpled shirt and there was paint on it, and decided to raise a welfare concern. And so the school phoned me and I just laughed, and they said, "Why? What's so funny?" And I said, "Well, when she started the school, I said to her, if you want an iron shirt every morning, you are going to have to iron it yourself. Because it wasn't a job that I wanted. I will iron my own clothes. I'm not going to iron clothes for other people if they're capable of doing their own ironing." And she said, fine. It's never bothered her. And the teacher said, "But why? Why doesn't she want to come to school in an iron shirt?" And I sort of laughed it off and said, "Oh, well, you'll have to ask her." But this is the truth of it. The answer is, I actually really resent the fact that children in the UK have to wear school uniform, and I resent the expectation that I, particularly as a mother, are expected to maintain this uniform to some kind of pristine standard. That's not going to happen. This is my way of just kicking back a little bit. So I disagree very strongly with the whole concept of school uniform. No, as you probably gathered, I don't just disagree, I resent it. I think it's outdated, it's pointless, it's a waste of personal, financial, teaching, and global resources. It doesn't improve a child's education, and it makes school just that little bit more miserable. And again, I would like to reiterate, my daughter is on board with this. Believe me, if she wanted pristine uniforms, she would moan about it until it was remedied. And now, I'm not really going to mention private schools here. This is all state schools in the UK, because private schools represent a numerically insignificant minority of schools. So I'm not really going to discuss them here. I'm aware that they have an undue influence on UK society, but in terms of numbers, I'm going to ignore them. So school uniform in the UK, in the way it is now, became pretty much ubiquitous in the 1950s and 60s. Now, in the past, for schools, these are state-funded schools, kids would most often just wear their regular clothes. Some schools would put kids in the same sort of like overall or pinafore to keep the clothes clean underneath. And the reason for this was pretty obvious. Clothing, up until very recently, within my memory, was expensive. Most people would only have a few sets of clothes, and it would have been unreasonable for a school to demand that parents purchase an entire duplicate wardrobe. But I'm going to come back to that. But gradually, because of the influence of private schools and the kind of outlandish uniforms that they impose on the children, for example, Eton, state school kind of copied this trend, dressing boys like miniature businessmen like me, and girls like scaled down air hostesses some of the time. And so the uniform that we recognise now as ubiquitous in the UK, this kind of thing. So a blazer, a tie, boys and girls wear ties normally, a shirt and not shown, skirt or trousers, and uncomfortable hard shoes. That's based on what a businessman of 60 years ago would have worn to the office. And again, going back to Eton College, that ridiculous outfit of a silly jacket, silly hat was based on the costume of a gentleman from the 1820s, and it hasn't changed since. And again, I feel that's more of a flex. I can afford this school with this outlandish uniform. You can mock my children all you like, but they are going to own you when they are older. And that is, of course, true. But nevertheless, we can laugh, and we should. But uniform isn't just outdated in terms of fashion, and our culture has changed too, along with, to a certain extent, the educational philosophy of schools. Now, I'd agree some schools are still treating children like miniature criminals who are liable to explode if given a millimetre of freedom. But this is changing, and I find it particularly difficult to accept putting primary and infant school children in uniforms. We spend, as parents, the first 4 years of their lives nurturing these tiny little individuals, and then we have to wrestle them into identical itchy grey outfits from the age of 4. I remember feeling this sort of grief when my daughter started infant school and I realised she had this adorable wardrobe of cute things that she would probably never get the chance to wear again before she grew out of them, because she would spend most of her time in the uniform. And I thought, wait, hang on, I have to go and I have to buy an entire dreary duplicate set of clothes for her. She already has clothes. Why do I have to do this? And in the rest of Europe, and in fact much of the world, compulsory uniform is rare. It's only really seen in countries previously colonised by the UK. And in some countries, kids are excluded from schools when their parents cannot afford the uniform, which is a pathetic state of affairs with a very obvious solution. And it doesn't need to be said, but as the world stands, we are drowning in clothes, sometimes literally. We have massive dumps of clothing that can be seen from space. We have beaches that are just covered, not in sand, but discarded clothing. We don't live in a world where anyone should struggle to find something to dress themselves in. And in the UK, we are forcing parents to buy even more of them. It doesn't need to be said, but the clothes we are forced to buy, these school uniform clothes, are terrible quality. They're scratchy, they're shiny, they're badly made from bad fabrics in factories by people paid bad wages who are treated badly. Imagine being a child forced to sew uniform for children that you will never see going to a school that you yourself will never attend. They shed microplastics every time they're washed, and when the kid outgrows the clothes, nobody wants them because they've practically disintegrated. It's really hard to find someone to take outgrown school uniform. Partly because, of course, each school has their own requirements, and if you can't find anyone interested from your school, you're out of luck. Now, this is, by the way, is why my daughter's shirts are creased. I am a princess. I wouldn't buy the poly cotton ones. She does have 100% fancy cotton shirts, which, yeah, do get creased. They also, to be fair, don't get sweaty, and they do last a lot longer, and I think they're more comfortable. Now, one of the main arguments you'll hear in favour of school uniform is that it improves education. So, okay, I looked into the main research on which the UK government based its recommendation that schools have a uniform. Now, it's not a legal requirement in the UK to have a uniform in schools, which may surprise you. Like, it's not a regulatory requirement rather than legal. But the UK government requires schools to have what they call a uniform policy, as in they have to have something specifying what clothes are and are not acceptable in schools, which surprised me too. I assumed it was all you have to have a uniform unless you have a special reason. No, you don't have to. Now, the research the government based it on was actually funded by TrueTex, which are a brand who create uniform. They often create things like the book bags you see primary school kids have. They do custom printed sweatshirts and blazers and things like that with the school logo on them. That's the majority of their business, comes from customized uniform pieces that they sell. So yes, I would thoroughly expect any research funded by such a company to very much be in favour of, yes, school uniform is great. And the UK supermarkets, they also have a vested interest in encouraging school uniforms to be as prevalent as possible because they sell them. And so the research actually comes down to asking parents, do you like uniform? And everyone says, yeah. And what you'll find is the surveys also tend to regurgitate the same arguments, so that, and they become circular, as you'll see. So that it improves education, it improves discipline, it reduces bullying. But there is a big issue with all of these claims and these survey results, which I'll get into. So, okay, say the uniform improves discipline, reduces bullying, and it's particularly bullying based on kids' appearance or perceived wealth, because they all look the same and it encourages school pride. Another suggestion is that it makes kids identifiable in case they're being naughty out of school. So let's look at these. Now, it's impossible to point out a UK study or do a UK study which could prove that uniform improves discipline or reduces bullying, because uniform is ubiquitous in the UK. We could try to compare the exclusion rates or reported bullying incidents for the tiny number of schools which don't have uniform compared to those that do, and we would probably see no difference, but it's not a fair comparison because there's just too many schools that have uniform compared to those that don't. We did actually do a little informal comparison of my daughter's old primary school with my niece's primary school. Now, they're quite similar in age. These schools are more or less the same size in pretty similar socio-economic areas of northwest London. And they both have a very broad intake of kids, lots of different backgrounds and so forth. If anything, the uniform school does slightly worse overall than the non-uniform, but that's not much, just slightly. And there are a lot of other factors at play. So you couldn't say that not having a uniform is better because there's too many other things going on in these two schools. You'd need so much more data to draw any conclusions. There is no research that took a group of schools, ditched the uniform for half, and then compared things like exclusions, detentions, bullying, to see whether the moment kids were allowed to wear what they wanted, they instantly turned feral, which anecdotally, again, talking to parents, my husband and my sister-in-law are both school governors. They tell me parents say this to them. This does seem to be a belief that you put kids in some colourful clothing. It's like that scene in The Simpsons, they all go crazy. Anyway, even if you could do a study like that, even if it were possible, I still don't think it would be conclusive, nor do I think it would be necessary. It's just a stupid thing to claim when just about every school in the UK has compulsory uniform. How does it improve discipline? To what are we comparing? What if everyone attended school in dinosaur costumes? I would say that probably would have quite a big effect on discipline, but it would also be very funny. So I thought there must be something here. There must be some research somewhere. So I did find a study. Now, it is a study that claims to prove uniform improves discipline, and I will put the link in the description. But it's far from conclusive for quite a few reasons. This is the study, I believe, governments, schools, education boards, uniform companies, I believe this is the one that they are using because there are so few other ones out there. Firstly, one of the major problems is this study is American. So this is based on a different school system, different school culture, different ways of funding schools, and a country without a long-standing culture of school uniform. I am aware that some private schools in the US, particularly religious schools, do have a uniform that's similar to ours. But there again, there's not enough of those to make any particular conclusions either way. So one of the other big problems is, along with the uniform, this school introduced many other factors to improve discipline and its results. It would be dishonest, therefore, to claim that the issuing of every kid with chinos and a polo shirt was the deciding factor that brought about the improvements, because that's another problem. US state school uniforms tend to dress their children like cruise ship pool attendants. So there's another difference which could be highlighted, which I would like to highlight, is the kids are wearing clothing that is at least somewhat comfortable and not exactly comparable to this that you have to wear every day. By the way, in the UK, if you're hot, you have to ask permission to take your blazer off. So if your teacher runs cold or your teacher's sitting in a draft, they might you can't take your blazer off. That was the case when I was at school, which was a very long time ago. Apparently, it's still the case now. Little power trip going on. So I would also make a little observation that I do find it somewhat awkward that a school board puts everyone in the most deeply WASP garments you could imagine, and then claims behaviour's gotten better on that basis and ignores all of the factors and I just thought that was interesting to highlight. Another argument that I do hear, which barely deserves any attention is uniform identifies kids out of school. So if you're a head teacher, you say things like school pride, which is absurd. Children don't, as a rule, choose which school they attend. Parents do. And often parents have to just pick a couple of the least worst options from the list and hope for the best. The idea that kids should be inherently proud of the school they end up in is kind of daft. It's like being loyal to the budget airline. You know, you don't pick and choose. You don't go, oh, I definitely want to fly Ryanair because I love them. No, you go there, you choose that because it goes to where you want and offers you the best price. The loyalty is kind of secondary to that. Perhaps some people do love Ryanair. I mean, you know, you do you. But my daughter's old my daughter's old school head teacher used to talk about brand identity, which conjured for me the dystopian view of 8-year-olds worshipping the logo every morning. And as for identifying kids, like putting them in prison overalls, presumably, this is also silly. If a kid takes off their tie, takes off the blazer, bish bosh, generic child in shirt, trousers or a skirt. Unless your kid has the questionable good luck to attend a school where they have to wear a plaid kilt or more unusual shades like purple or brown. I mean, I can confirm that the lads causing problems in the Kingsbury Lidl the other day were just about smart enough to take off identifying garments before they started. So in the UK, school uniform is just assumed to be a good thing and few people question it. But it stifles creativity, kids want to wear what they want, and it puts parents to unnecessary expense for no good reason. There is no evidence that school uniform improves discipline at all, because there is no way that you can say this school has uniform, this school doesn't, this non-uniform school is chaos, because there aren't any schools like that in the UK. School uniform is almost ubiquitous, so any claim of an improvement is nonsense. I mean, maybe you would claim that it maintains discipline, but again, show me the school with no uniform where the kids are setting it on fire and it's like St. Trinian's, which also had uniform. So finally, I would say it's a waste of teaching time. Teachers are expected to police children's attire to an extent that I find absurd and, off the record, teachers find absurd. Imagine spending your time having to check whether anyone has sneaked into school wearing, shocker, a pair of Air Force Ones, which apparently are synonymous with sneaking in a vape. I mean, they're shoes. But even better, you can wear Air Force Ones if you've got a note. So you just have to get your parents to say she's got bunions, she has to wear Air Force Ones. Or even teachers wasting time writing a kid up for the heinous crime of wearing mascara, not having their top button done up. I'd like to point out that I have. But give kids something to push against, and they absolutely will. There's also a minefield for teachers of checking the lengths of skirts, and also for some schools deciding who does and does not get to wear a skirt. I mean, being an adolescent is quite bad enough without grown-ups telling you what to wear and how to present. And I don't, again, talking of evidence, I failed to find any evidence that allowing a kid to wear what they want causes any sort of issue. I mean, there may be background reasons behind these choices that are the issue, but the clothes themselves, I don't think they are. So the only other thing I would like to finish with is anecdotally again. My school, unlike a lot of UK schools, demanded uniform in the sixth form as well. And I'm proud to say that this, now sitting here, is the first time since I left school in that I have worn a tie. It's also probably the first time that I have done up my top button. The day I left, I took my tie off, undid the button, untucked my shirt. I was 18 years old, and I said, right, I am never doing any of those things again. I am never tucking in my shirt. I am never doing up my top button, and I am never wearing a sodding tie. And I'm pleased to say I have never done any of those things. So that's it really. I feel this is probably not that much of a hot take, but if you disagree, please do explain why wearing sweaty, uncomfortable clothes is a good thing for children to do, and why you yourself aren't doing the same. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, or now you're enraged by me. You never know. If you have any comments, do share them, do like and subscribe. I'm just saying whatever I want to say on this channel. I'll see what things get the most views and go from there. But yeah, I'm going to take this off now because I'm horrifically uncomfortable, and I'll see you in the next one.